So Bezrat Hashem, today we are, as I said last week, this is more of a kind of a technical shiur, what we're covering today. We are in the second half of Rambam Hilchot Teshuva, the third parak, and we're talking about, starting with Halacha Vav, Ve'elu hein she'en lahem chelek le'olam haba. So we're going to go through a whole list now for the rest of the parak of people who do not get a portion in Olam Haba. יש שניים ככה בעברית עם אנגלית, חוץ מזה אני לא יודע אם יש משהו למעלה. And let's see, I wanted to I think we can dive right into this. How's that? I would just say that, my own particular read of this is that each parak in the Sefer has a kind of a headline theme, and the theme, I think, of the third parak is a lot of the parak deals with issues of personal responsibility. That we not only have a responsibility to say the vidui and to do teshuva ourselves, but we also have responsibility to live our lives in a certain way. And again, we can say that that's a responsibility that operates on multiple levels at the same time, as Rambam's view of we have to work hard on ourselves all our lives to perfect ourselves. We have to work hard on our interpersonal relationships to perfect our effect on other people. We have to work hard on our relationship to the broader society to help perfect the society. And ultimately, Rambam says the reason that the Torah wants us to build and maintain a just and a well-functioning society is because the purpose of human life is to contemplate the nature of God. And so we must do everything for ourselves in terms of setting aside distractions, and we must do everything that we can for other people and for the society to enable everybody, to the extent possible, Bezrat Hashem, to spend as much of their energy and focus as possible on contemplating God and striving to know God. It's a challenge.
Not contemplating, but acting.
Well, the acting is, again, Rambam, yes. But Rambam's view, again, is that our ultimate purpose is to come to know God. And I think it's fair to say that the more we come to know God, the more we will also embody godliness or godly behaviors in the way we act and the way that we act in the world. So yes, of course, it's all part of the same sacred ball of wax, right? So, Elohim she'en lahem chelek le'olam haba. These are the ones who do not have a portion in the world to come. Ela nichratim ve'ovdim ve'niddunim al godel rash'am chatatam le'olam u'le'olmei olamim. They are judged and they are set apart and they're lost forever, meaning they go to Gehinnom, which is right down the street over here, forever. Haminim. Now we're going to give a kind of headline of these different categories, and we're going to give a very simplistic definition of them, and then the Rambam goes into greater detail to explain what is meant by these different terms. Haminim, which we'll call heretics, which also historically is a term applied to Christians. Apikosim, we'll get to that, right? Ha-kofrim b'Torah, people who deny the Torah. Ha-kofrim b'tchiat hametim, people who deny the resurrection of the dead. U'viviat hagoel, and people who deny the coming of the Mashiach. Ha-mumarim, what we call apostates. Ha-mechate'eh harabim, people who make the community sin. Haposhim midarchei tzibur, the people who separate themselves from the ways of the community of the tzibur. V'aseh averot biyad rama befarhesia, people who do sins out in the open in a chutzpahdik way, who do it, who make a big show of doing sins in public. Ke Yehoyakim, like King Yehoyakim, which we'll touch on in just a moment. The Hamosarim are people who turn other Jews over to the authorities, typically to non-Jewish authorities. And people who throw the fear of quote-unquote God into the public, but not for the sake of God, not Hashem Shamayim. And murderers, Uvale lashon hara, and people who speak lashon hara, v'hamoshech olato, and a man who extends his foreskin. There were people back in the day, there were Jews who needed to pass or, didn't want to be found out. And I'm not sure exactly what the process is of, I guess there was the, if you'll pardon the pun, I guess that was the original sheep potzim. But anyway.
That's why superglue was invented.
But there was apparently some kind of a process where people, I think they would like hang weights on their foreskin, and over time it would like stretch it out. Interesting. Okay. Hamisha hem hanikrim minim. So there are 5 categories of people that are called minim. Haomer she'en sham Eloah ve'en la'olam manhig. A person who says that there's no God and that there is no person running the world, no entity running the world. אומר שיש שם מנהיג, אבל הם שניים או יותר. Or one who says that there is a ruler to the world, but it's more than one. There's 2 or 3 or whatever. ואומר שיש שם ריבון אחד, אבל שהוא גוף ובעל תמונה. Or somebody who admits that there is only one God to the world, but says that this God has a physical body and a visible physical presence. Or a person who says, yeah, there's a thing that runs this world, but that's not the ultimate be all and end all, and it's not the only one. There's like something that came before him. או מזל וזולתו, כדי להיות מליץ בינו ובין ריבון העולמי. Or somebody who worships, let's say, a star or a constellation or whatever, or some other entity, in order that other entity should be the go-between between us and the Lord and the God of all, right? כל אחד מחמישה אלו מין. You good with this? Or do you want to go back and discuss the... Right? And I would say within this little halacha, we see Rambam's discussion of how Rambam different versions of the text have been variously expurgated over the centuries, right? But basically, Rambam, in agreement with Muslim scholars, Rambam believes that Islam is a true religion because they're monotheists, and says that Christianity is not because the Trinity makes them polytheists. Historically, one might argue that perhaps Rambam also felt he needed to say that because he was living in the Muslim world, and there are in fact historians who believe that Rambam and his family at a certain point converted to Islam, at least outwardly, just in order to survive. Be that as it may, in another place, Rambam will say that one of the things he's going to say, I believe, in the next couple of halachas, that while there are other true religions, they are true for them. But we are, even though they are true or have truth for others, we are prohibited from embracing them. Welcome. I don't know about this thing with the mask. Maybe it's kind of a bracha levatala today.
The mask is the least of the problem today.
What? Okay. Halacha het. So we spoke. He mentions Yehoyakim. Yehoyakim.
Can I just ask?
Please.
What is the consensus of rabbinical opinion over history about what Maimonides says?
You mean Christianity, Islam, true or not true? I think I'm on good ground by saying it's a machlokas.
Well said.
I would go, in fact, to Rambam himself, who, not in this sefer, but in other places, he says that whatever the problems of Christianity or Islam, it's good that they came into the world because they're training for the non-Jews to ultimately come to the truth of the one God. So 3 is fewer than 1,000, right? For the people who believe that everything has a special divinity that inhabits it, they shrunk it down to 3.
But it's a very expensive training program.
Well, but anyway, so I can't say that that I'm aware of a specific official party line on it. I do a fair amount of work with Christians, and they're always asking me, well, what's this with you being the chosen people? And I always say, well, I didn't make it up. You know, if you got a problem with it, you got to talk to the boss. But you can also become a Jew if you want, right? I'm not going to stand in your way, right? But
we're chosen to show them something that they would never know on their own.
Right.
That's why we're chosen.
That's exactly it. We were chosen to bring, you know, it's our obligation to bring the Torah into the world, both as a user's guide for the human soul, but also to put it into practice and put it into action and show the world what it's like, what it means to live in a godly way. It's a big challenge. Anyway, so just a quick sidebar. He mentions Yehoiakim, who was known to be wicked. In the second book of Kings, in the 23rd and 24th parak, talks about how he takes over, and he did, as it says, he did what was bad in the eyes of God, as they all did. It's kind of a theme that runs through our history. And as a result, Nebuchadnezzar comes along, replaces him with his own, with Yehoiakim's own uncle, whose name is changed to Tzidkiyahu. We all know about Tzidkiyahu, who for all the good that he tries to do, it's too late. And Jerusalem falls, and the Babylonian captivity ensues. So, you know, it seems like, why does Rambam choose to mention Yehoiakim here in this parak? I think it goes back to what he was saying earlier, that we all need to view ourselves as though we're 50-50. Zchuyot and Averot, right? That we're just on the cusp of, if we do one more Avera, we can destroy the whole world. And if we do one more mitzvah, we can save the whole world, right? And so even replacing Yehoiakim with Tzidkiyahu, it was too late. The damage had already been done. But Tzidkiyahu, for all that he tried to do, there was nothing that he could do, right? So it's kind of like, heads up, guys, okay? Now, there are three types of people who are called apikorsim. Pay attention, because this is one definition, one of Rambam's definitions of apikorsim. He does have slightly different definitions in other places in his writings, not in this sefer. One, ha'omer she'en sham nevu'ah klal, ve'en sham mada she'magia me'habore lelev bnei adam. One who says that there is no such thing as nevuah, there is no such prophecy, and there's no kind of information that can arrive anywhere in any way from God into the mind of a human being. And again, remember, the word lev does not mean the physical organ, the heart. It means the mind, right? It means the mind, the brain, the soul, the whole inner being of the human being, right? Lev really takes on a different meaning when the Baal HaTanya talks about lev and moach, where he now makes the lev the seat of the passions. But in Torah and in rabbinic writing, it means the mind. And so he's saying that the person who says that God can't put thoughts into or speak to the mind of a human being, that's one definition of apikoros. And a person who denies the nevuah, the prophecy of Moshe. And ha'omer she'en haborei yodea ma'aseh bnei adam. And the person who says that God does not know the actions of people. So I'm not sure, we can talk. But he says this is apikoros. We're working with his definitions, right? He says three. So a person who says that there's no such thing as prophecy, right? A person who says that Moshe Rabbeinu's prophecy wasn't prophecy, and a person who says that God does not know the actions of human beings.
So it sounds like if you deny Hashem, you're not apikoros.
That's right. He comes to that. No, but that's right. And by the way, there's the Talmudic concept of kimle midrabamene, right? You go according to when a person commits a series of crimes in one action, they're judged according to the most severe of the crimes, right? So a person, God forbid, who denies the existence of God altogether is not apikoros. Exactly. The person might say, well, there's a God, but God doesn't interact with us, and God doesn't care what happens with us. There's just like, there's what we call deists, right? The people who believe that God kind of like wound up the universe like an alarm clock and put it down and then walked away and doesn't care what happens to us and doesn't even pay attention to what happens to us, okay? So I don't know. I must say I don't know whether when he's saying she'en haborei yodea ma'aseh bnei adam, I don't know whether he's referring to a specific philosophy or cult or group within his milieu at the time, or if he's just saying that we know that there are people who believe that God does not interact or care or even know about what we're doing. Kol echad mishlosha elu apikosim. Each one of these three is an apikoros. Now there are three people that are called kofrim b'Torah, people who reject the Torah. Person who says that the Torah did not come from God. Afilu pasuk echad, afilu tava echad. Im omer Moshe amaro b'fi atzmo, harei ze kofer b'Torah. Even a single syllable. If a person says, well, everything came from the God except Moshe, made this one correction over here. If you attribute even one letter of the Torah to not coming directly from God, you are a kofer b'Torah. V'chein ha-kofer b'firusha. V'chein Torah Shabbat, v'hu Torah Shabbat peh. And also a person who rejects the perush of the Torah, the interpretation of the Torah, which is the same person who rejects Torah Shabbat peh. V'hamachish magideha. Kegon Tzadok Ubaitus, and a person who rejects the teachers of Torah Shabbat Peh, like the story of Tzadok and Baitus, which is a very important and very famous story from Pirkei Avot, which is, I'll finish, Be'ezrat Hashem, finish this one paragraph, and then we'll touch on it, right? Homer she'haborei achalif mitzvah zo b'mitzvah acheret u'kvar batla Torah zo. Or a person who says, well, God, we used to have this one mitzvah, but God decided to cancel that mitzvah and put a different one in its place, right? Afal pi shehi hayta me'im Hashem, kagon ha'yishu ha'yosh'im ve'ha'hagerim. He's saying like the Christians and the Muslims. So I would say that maybe, there are people who today who say stuff like, well, the reason that we had all these laws about mixing meat and dairy, they didn't have refrigerators, so it wasn't so safe, and shellfish, it's like they couldn't clean it properly, so there's all these these concerns about hygiene, but today we don't need it, right? It's like these are I'm smarter than God, I'm smarter than the Torah, right? So it's almost I want to suggest that one of the ways of looking at that is that and I'm sure it doesn't apply to any of you, but I'm certainly guilty of once in a while saying, does this halacha make sense anymore in the modern world? What's the application today? I don't know, and yet we do it, right? But now he's also saying that there are people who have taken the Torah and said, yeah, it was true, but you know what? God canceled it. God took it away from y'all and gave it to us.
These are all the replacement theology.
It is.
Secular or religious.
It is, right. Now, but what he's saying is specifically, now he's talking to us. He's talking to Jews, right? So he's saying, because again, in other places he says, and whether it's just, again, survival or his actual hashkafat, he says that Islam has truth to it, is a true religion because it's true monotheism and it's not avodah zarah. And I can see that, fundamentally, they pray to God, they don't make pictures of God, it's forbidden, they're even more stringent about, physical depictions of the world than we are. To the extent of, the incredibly beautiful, if you go, for example, to Spain, to Granada, you'll see these incredibly beautiful, the Alhambra in Granada. Gorgeous, right? If you see the mosques and so on all over Iran, right? It's all these, abstract geometric shapes, right? And calligraphy. And in many cases, they weren't even permitted to draw pictures of animals and birds because that was somehow or other, doing God's things that are only God.
Of the Torah.
Well, they think that their God,
They make it up.
Yeah,
That's what the Christians do.
they think that their God is the successor. They think that it's the same God.
One of us is right.
They think it's the same God. Well, it's a whole separate discussion. Yeah, but that's a whole separate discussion, because ultimately, the ultimate vision of Tanakh is Be'ezrat Hashem, b'mehera b'yameinu, ki beiti beit tefillah yakareh l'kol ha'amim. And it doesn't say that everybody has to become a Jew. It's called ha'amim, to every nation.
You have to know high commandments.
All the nations have their own way to God. And the ultimate view of Tanakh is that all of those ways will come to acknowledge and recognize the one God.
With the no-hug commandments. They can't do it without the no-hug commandments.
But they don't
wanna
have
be
to keep
Jewish.
kosher. They don't have to keep Chabad.
The no-hug commandments doesn't say that.
No, in Achinami. But what I'm saying is that just, so I want to hold out the possibility that the truth of Islam and the truth of Christianity will ultimately emerge, and that the practitioners of those religions will recognize the unity and the truth of the one God and come here to pray with us in the restored Beit HaMikdash. Mihira Yivane. Halacha Tet. Shnaim hem mumarim meIsrael. There are two people that we call apostates. Mumar. Mumar.
That's the genius of Judaism, that it makes room for everyone. It is totally non-exclusive.
Exactly.
We have B'nai Israel, we have B'nai Noah.
Right.
We are the only people to do that.
And that's what like the Christians would say to me, well, why are you chosen? Why can't they don't understand, right? And so to say B'Shem Omro, I heard a teaching from Rabbi Shlomo Karlebach, because I used to go and pray with him every Simchat Torah, which was an amazing experience. And one year he taught about Cain and Abel, and he said, it's a normal human thing to be jealous, but think about it. Like Cain, he could have said, "Wait a minute, my own brother brings an offering that God accepts. My own brother, and I'm like right next to him.
What can I learn?"
But instead, he killed him. Right? So the Christians say, wait a minute, so you brought the Torah came into the world through your hands, and from you we received all this wisdom and all this knowledge, and you're right, and we live here in the same world with you? Gewalt, our own brothers. But no, well, who said that you can be chosen and we're not chosen? Why aren't we chosen? And my first question is, why is it so important to you? If you think that your book replaced our book, so why do you even care that we're here? Right? But our very existence is so inflammatory for people who consider themselves our true successors. Honestly, it's a mystery. It's a mystery.
And we want to share with them. They want to destroy.
Yes, please.
Before COVID, I went to the two major hospitals and some other minor hospitals here in Jerusalem. I went into every room that I could walk into, which is a lot of rooms, and asked people if they wanted a brother.
Are you a Kohen?
The Jews were happy to.
Just curious, are you a Kohen?
Well, no, I'm not a Kohen.
Okay. No, that's fine. I'm sure your bracha carries a lot of weight. I'm not questioning that. I'm just curious.
All right. The Jews were most big majority happy to receive a bracha. The Muslims, the big majority, even happier to receive a bracha. The
Christians?
Now, if the people from other faiths, you could see who they were. Fine. Our erstwhile brothers, no.
Who?
Christians. They don't want a blessing from the Jew. Are you Jewish? Yeah. No thanks. There it is, right there. A person who's just coming in. There it is, right there. But I have a question for you about the Muslims. Do they have a belief in the messianic future like we do?
As I understand it, the Shiites do, right? They have the 12er, they have the hidden imam who's going to come back. There are a lot of kind of parallels between Shiism and Christianity in that regard.
They all want to ascend. They don't understand the idea of bringing Hashem.
Well, it's get a little off topic here, but I think it's very important to remind ourselves the fundamental difference between our book and the other two Abrahamic books, if you will, right? That our book is in this world, and their books are in some other world, right? That Jesus says to his followers, you do what I want you to do, what I instruct you to do, and after you die, you'll live forever in my Father's mansion. And Muhammad says, you do what Allah instructs me to tell you to do, and after you die, you'll dwell in the beautiful gardens. And God says to Abraham, go from this piece of real estate into that piece of real estate, take it over, settle there, make it your home, and your descendants will live there forever. In this world. So we live very much in this world. And one of the underappreciated even by us, really magnificent points of Torah and of Judaism. And as you were talking about, like, specifically speaking about, like, Sarah, for example, like the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who says that, Sarah is more important than Abraham, because Sarah is what keeps Abraham and his sons tied to this world. That the physical body is, in a sense, more important than the neshama, because the neshama is eternal. The physical body is once. It's a once in cosmic history event. And it's only in the physical body that the neshama can actually grow and learn and do mitzvot. And learn how to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right?
The physical connecting to the spirit.
Right. So we live as spiritual and physical beings, and it's not a dichotomy, it's not a tension, right? It's not, well, we can't wait to get rid of this earthly body and leave this veil of tears and go on to, where we're gonna live forever, whatever, playing the harps and singing or whatever it is we're gonna do up there, or drinking the waters and eating the fruits, and drinking the wine, whatever. No. This is where it's happening. This is where the rubber meets the road. This is where God and our soul and the world and the cosmos all meet. And how does the Torah begin, right? You would think about it. If you want Judaism, if you whatever religion you're trying to spread, if you want to emphasize that, it's all about the eternal soul, you would begin the book of Genesis by saying, in the beginning, God created the eternal soul. And the eternal soul is without form and is without substance, and it is eternal, and it's the most amazing thing, and it's beautiful, and it's gorgeous, and it's stunning, and it's gewalt.
I didn't see that in the Torah yet.
And the Torah begins, and the Torah doesn't talk about the soul. The Torah says, in the beginning, God creates the sky, and the earth, and the water, and the trees, and the birds, and the flowers, and the animals, and the human beings, and then says, eat this, don't eat that. God doesn't even say, now pray to me so that after you die. No, God says, eat this, don't eat that. Take care of the garden. This is your job. You have to take care of the garden. Right? Oh, you didn't do your job right? Well, now I'm going to move you to a different place. God doesn't say you didn't do the job right. I'm going to, wipe you out and start all over again. Oh, I wish I taught you differently. God, it's all about the here and now. And the halacha is
going the wrong way on a one-way street.
Sorry?
Our enemies go the wrong way on a one-way street.
But I think our first job is to make sure that we're going the right way, the one-way street, which is Bezrat Hashem, which is in itself a challenge. So where are we now? Okay, so there are two who are called mumarim, apostates. המומר לעבירה אחד, והמומר לכל התורה כולה. So apostate is a person who rejects their religion, right? So this is a person who is an apostate with regard to one specific mitzvah, or a person who's an apostate with respect to the entire Torah. Mumar l'avera achad, the person who's a mumar with respect to one sin, זה שהזיק עצמו לעשות אותה עבירה בזדון והורגל ונתפרסם בה. A person who decides that they're going to do this one avera, they're going to do it on purpose, and they're going to do it publicly, and they're going to let everybody know they're doing it. Afilu hayta min hakalot, kigon shechuzak tamid lilbosh shatnes. Even if it's like one of the what we call the light sins. And remember that he has a very explicit definition of light and heavy, kalot chamorot, right? That there's the ones for which you get forgiven right away, and then there's the ones for which there are karet, or there is punishment by Beit Din, right? So he says, for example, a person who wears shatnez. So what's the punishment for wearing shatnez? You're not supposed to do it, right? It's not that you're going to get karet for it or whatever. But, let's, and before we start thinking about how silly this sounds, I knew, excuse me?
Cutting the sideburns.
Well, yeah, but I knew, for example, and it's a very famous name, so I'm certainly not going to name him, but he was a very, very wealthy man in New York City who became more and more self-identified as, an observant Jew. And he said, but one thing, because he grew up in like the Bronx or whatever, and he lived in New York for a number of years, back in New York, and he was very rich. And he said, but one thing is, I didn't spend 30 years of my life developing one of the most refined palates in the world in order to confine myself to drinking kosher wine. And he was very open about it, right? So now, do I think that that's a big avera? Drinking non-kosher wine, I'm less worried about than I am about him making an announcement of it, right? And this is exactly what the Rabbi is talking about.
So the wine's about the wine.
Right. Bum, bum. You know, so, you know, like you make a big deal about, you know, the Shabbos table, we're only going to drink kosher wine, but I didn't spend, you know, decades of my life developing one of the most refined palates in the world to restrict myself to only kosher wine. The rest of the week I drink. And, you know, given who he was, I'm sure that he didn't, you know, like for me, a nice bottle of wine would be like $30. You know, I'm sure that for him, a nice bottle of wine was, you know, at least 10 times that, you know, just like a regular vachadik everyday weekday, you know, planque de la maison, right? Or haqif pe'ah, as you said, or a person who decides to, you know, shave their corners, right? V'nimtza ke'ilu batla mitzvah zo min olam etzlo. And it's like, that mitzvah never existed in the world, as far as he's concerned. This is a person who's an apostate with respect to this one thing. Of course, the person who does this, like, lahachastik, on purpose, spitefully, right? And a person who is an apostate with respect to the whole Torah, kegon, חוזרים לדעת האות הכוכבים, בשעה שגוזרים גזירה וידבק בהם. So this is something that's much more powerful and much more important, right? A person who reverts to the practices of Avodah Zarah under duress and clings to them, vayomar, and says, "Ma betza li lehidabek b'Yisrael, shehem shfalim v'nirdafim." So what good does it do me to cling to and identify myself as part of the Jewish people? Look, they're so downtrodden, and they're being chased all over the place. They're being, you know, hounded to death. Tov li she'adbek be'elu she'adam techifa. Better, I should identify with, and I should become part of the group that have the upper hand, the ones who are on the attack, not the ones who are being pursued. This is a person who is a mumar, an apostate with respect to the whole Torah. I'll go back 1 second because I promised we would talk about Tzadok and Baitus. Are we all familiar with the story? So they're mentioned, for example, in Pirkei Avot. Who are Tzadok and Baitus? There were these. We've heard of the Tzdukim, right? And the whatchamacallits, the Tzdukim and the, what are they called? Help me out, guys. Huh? I'm losing my vocabulary in like so many different languages. I'm telling you. Huh? The Karaites. Thank you. The Tzdukim and the Karaites, right? And so in Pirkei Avot, it talks about being very careful. It says the teachers need to be very, very careful of the way they express themselves, because you don't want your words to be subject to misinterpretation. What kinds of two kinds of misinterpretation? One is that somebody might not really understand the message and might try to give over the message and give it over wrong and lead to confusion, or God forbid, to worse. Or that you might say something in a way that is not 100% clear, so that somebody could purposely distort your words. And so what do they talk about? In Pirkei Avot, it says, don't be like the avadim, like servants who serve the master in hope of receiving a reward, but rather be like servants who serve the master not in hope of receiving a reward, right? So it's Hashem that they would she'yikablu schar, velo Hashem she'yikablu schar. And Tzadok and Baitus decided that they were going to take over. And so they said, you see, what they're teaching is that there is no schar v'onesh. There is no such thing as reward and punishment. Because all they did was they inverted two words, right? It's instead of lo almanat she'yikablu schar, not on condition that they receive reward. They inverted the words, and it says almanat she'lo yikablu schar, on the condition that they will not receive reward. And they said, you see, what they're teaching is that you, even though you do the will of God, God will not reward you. So why bother? Which, fast forward, and we mentioned him in Shir before, this is, I think, ultimately the problem of Elisha ben Abuya. It's the story of Achem. He says, Zot Torah v'zot zot zchuta. This is the Torah, and this is the schara. This is the reward of keeping the Torah, that this man climbed the tree to chase away the mother bird, and he fell and died. He said that he's sheker. This doesn't work.
It was actually a son of a rabbi he was giving, what do you call it, honoring his father by going up to, and then he fell down.
Right.
He fell down.
He was doing both mitzvot together.
Yeah.
The two mitzvot of kibbutz and thank you, and of shiluch haken. So the two mitzvot that the Torah explicitly says you do this, you get long life.
Well, like,
He was honoring his father by climbing up the tree to shoo away the mother bird, and he fell in. So
So it was pure.
you know what? Who knows? I don't know. I mean, it's very nice to say, well, we don't know what else would have happened or happened, or we don't have no idea what, in the mind of God sort of thing, but it's problematic, and I think the part that's problematic, that I think is problematic, that I haven't seen other people addressing, is what's problematic is Elisha ben Abuya's approach to Torah is based on tzchar v'onesh, and based on reward and punishment, and based on, it's like almost like a transactional relationship. I did this, I didn't get the reward that you promised, so and for somebody who was such a great Torah teacher, and who his Torah is what his Torah comes from through Rabbi Meir, and the Rabbi Stam Mishnah is Rabbi Meir, right? The Mishnah quotes Rabbi Meir over and over and over again. Rabbi Meir is definitionally a huge part of the way we live our lives today, and his teacher was Elisha ben Abuya, and so there's it's very problematic.
It seems hollow.
Well, I think it speaks also to the greatness of the cloud, that Rabbi Meir was able, what Elisha ben Abuya was not capable of doing, of seeing through his own preconceptions, if you will, right? Seeing through his own blindness, right? It's kind of like that his Torah is very self-centered, very focused on himself, right? He begins by saying, when he was born and they had a bris, and his father invited the Torah scholars, and there were all these people there, and the singers were singing, and the musicians were making music, and the dancers were dancing, and the cooks were cooking, and the Torah scholars decided, well, we're going to do our thing, and they started learning Torah, and above their heads the flames were shooting out, and he said, Gewalt, I want to be like that.
He said Gewalt.
He said Gewalt, yeah. It's actually an ancient Aramaic term. He said Gewalt, I want to be like that, right?
Wow.
And so first of all, on the one hand you can say, wow, isn't that an amazing thing? Like this little child, he hears about it, he sees it, and he wants to be like that. But it's right away, it's according to Rambam's definition, which is very black and white, this is Torah shelo lishma. Torah not for the sake of Torah. Rambam says that Torah shelo lishma, what does it mean? It means that somebody who's going to learn Torah specifically to get some other outcome, that I'm going to get, people are going to call me Rabbi, I'm going to get a chauffeur limousine, I'm going to be a Rosh Yeshiva, people are going to want to come to my shul, people are going to give me donations, somebody's going to give me a gold watch, the flames are going to shoot out of my head, right? It's all specifically Shelo Lishma. So how can one of the Gedolei Yisrael, how can one of the great teachers from whom we get so much of Torah Sheba'al Peh, how can it be a person who explicitly learns Torah Shelo Lishma? So it had to be kind of digested and sifted through the anivut, through the humility and the hashkafa of Rabbi Meir. So then I want to suggest that what Elisha ben Abuya had was tremendous knowledge, but perhaps no wisdom, or not the wisdom to temper his knowledge, right? And so the greatness, for example, of Ben Zakkai, it says that he was like the least of his generation. Kind of suggests that what he lacked comparatively in knowledge, he made up for in wisdom, because he was the one who understood how to get everybody to do what they did best. And that's what made him a leader. How to get people to play nicely together, and how to get every person to make the ultimate, the optimum and maximum of their own contribution. And that's real leadership. In order to be a leader, you don't need to be able to do everybody else's job. You need to understand how everybody else's jobs all fit together to make the whole, right? So the greatness of leadership. And anyway, so Rambam here is saying that there's a mumar in with respect to one halacha, which, let's say, for example, this very wealthy man who says, I'm rich enough that I can have a $1,200 bottle of wine for dinner any night of the week, anytime I want to. On Shabbos, I'll only drink kosher wine, but for the rest of the time, I didn't spend all. Okay. So, and he makes a big announcement. We look at this and we say, who behaves like that? We all know people who behave like that.
It's all about the buzz.
It's all about the Benjamin. That's right. It's all about the Merlots. It's all about whatever, right? Excuse me. Or somebody who, when the chips are down, says, "Forget it. You know what? These Jews can't take care of themselves. I'm going to go over to the other side."
Well, there are kosher wines that would cost $1,000 a bottle also.
Right. Well, that's we've come a long way. I don't know. Okay. Halacha Yud. Let's see if we can finish this paragraph. Who are those people who make the community sin? אחד שחטאים בדבר גדול, כגון ירבעם וצדוק ובייטוס. So Tzadok and Baitus, again, is who led people astray, not just like saying it's okay to drink this non-kosher wine, but they taught people, you see what the rabbis are teaching? And again, all they did was they inverted the order of two words. Not in order to receive reward, in order to not receive reward, right? Rambam in Pirkei Avot, he gives this beautiful, elucidation of it. He says, it's like the Bal HaBayit. The father says to his son, or the husband says to the wife, do me a favor. I want you to, bring me a glass of water, and I will give you a dinar, right? Now, a son does not bring his father a glass of water in order to get the dinar. The wife does not bring her husband a glass of water because he's paying her, but rather, Rambam says, it's from, they're going to do it anyway, and they're going to do it because of their relationship. But from his generosity and as an expression of his feeling towards them, it's bonus. It's a reward, right? And so he goes beyond the notion of reward and punishment and saying it's not just a shopkeeper transaction, right? He goes beyond it. And this is the greatness of his insight on this piece of Pirkei Avot. He says, because when you think about it, I'm bringing somebody I love their cup of coffee. It's an expression of my relationship to that person, of my love for that person. That person is sitting there and says, you know what? Here's a $10 bill. Here's 100 shekel. Here's whatever, right? Give up. I didn't expect it. It's not because of that, right? But it's because now we have each given freely as an expression, as a concrete expression of our relationship and of our love for one another, right? And if I say to my father, or if I say to my brother, my friend, my spouse, whatever, I'll bring you your cup of coffee, but how much are you going to pay me for it, right? By the way, so I get up before my wife and I bring my wife a cup of coffee every morning. And you know something? It's a small gesture. It's so important. Can you imagine now? I'm just thinking, if I walked into the bedroom with a cup of coffee and I said, "Hi, sweetie, 50 shekel, please."
Do the ironing.
So usually, I'm just talking about in my marriage, right? I usually do the laundry, and I, will hang it up, and then she'll fold it up and put it away, right? It's not like we're on a schedule, but it's just the way things, when you live together, things work out, right? And I'll say to her, I can do that. She says, you don't understand. I actually enjoy folding the laundry. It's because, I don't think of it in terms of I enjoy doing the laundry, but I guess I do. It's part of our life together. Somebody has to do the laundry. I do the laundry. Somebody has to fold the laundry. She folds the laundry. Can you imagine what a marriage would be like if you said, okay, you folded the laundry, here's 10 shekels, but by the way, I cooked dinner, so you owe me 50. So, okay, so 10, 50, okay, so you owe me 4, okay, so, right? But, so there are people who reduce their relationship to God to that type of a cheshbon, that type of a calculation, And again, I would say that really the ultimate example of that is perhaps Elisha ben Abuya, and I think it's very striking, it's kind of shocking, and I don't think that the sugyas in the Gemara about Elisha ben Abuya are usually taught from that perspective, but that's the perspective that I've gotten on, from learning it a few times. So, Halacha Yud, Chatei Rabim Ketzad, Echad Shechaitim B'Davar Gadol, Kagon Tzadok B'Baitus. So somebody who leads them astray completely, like Tzadok B'Baitus, saying, don't believe this, you're not going to get a reward. And another is somebody who leads the group, the community straight with a small thing. Afilu levatel mitzvah aseh ve'echad ha'ones אחרים עד שחטאו כמנשה שהורג את ישראל עד שיעבדו עבודת כוכבים או שידעה אחרים וידיחה. So there are people talks about the wicked king Menashe who forced Israel to do certain types of sins in Avodah Zarah, but there are also, let's go back to my multimillionaire friend who says, this thing about kosher wine doesn't apply to me because look at me, because there are very few people in the world who can appreciate a glass of wine the way I can. Well, if I'm sitting next to them, I might say, like what?
Pass the Coca-Cola.
Can you? No, I might say, really? Because as it says in Fiddler on the Roof, right? When you're rich, they think you really know, right? Hi, good morning. And so this guy's rich. Maybe he really knows. So you know what? I'm not gonna stop drinking kosher wine, but can I taste it? Like, okay, I have like a little taste of it. So explain to me, what's so special about this wine that it costs $1,200 a bottle that I can't get out of the bottle of kosher wine that I spent, $18 for? What's so special about it? He's going to explain to me. Well, in order to really appreciate this, you need to taste a lot of different kinds of wine. You know what? I'm having a wine tasting next week. Why don't you come? I'll taste it. So it's not so, we don't have so much, governments that are cutting off our legs if we don't bow down to their idols. I mean, Keilu maybe also, right? But it's very easy to fall under the influence of somebody who is charismatic, who has something that we don't have, right? A person who has, a person who's got a net worth of $100 million. I'm not quite there. I don't know about, maybe some of you are, Gewalt, I hope so, right? But a person who's made so much money must know something. So you know what? I'm not going to stop keeping kosher, but I'm fascinated. Can I taste
But
the
that's
wine?
giving credence to celebrity status. You think these celebrities know what they're talking about?
But we all fall subject to that.
We can control that though.
First,
It's absolutely within our control.
it's within our power to control it, but first we need to be aware of it within ourselves. And usually the person that we know the least about is the one in the mirror, right? Well, about myself anyway. I'm talking about, I'm sure y'all are beyond me in that, but
Two-way mirror.
so Yud Aleph, Aporesh Medarche Tzibor, a person who turns away from the ways of the community. Af al pi shelo avar averot el nivdal me'adat Yisrael ve'eno oseh mitzvot bichlala. Even a person who doesn't do sins, but a person who just separates, turns away from the group and doesn't do mitzvahs with them. ולא נכנס בצרתם, ולא מתענה בתעניתם. And a person who does not share in the suffering of the Jewish people and does not fast together with the community. אלא הולך בדרכו כאחד מגויי הארץ וכאילו אינו מהם. אינו חלק לעולם הבא. But a person who, he's just off on his own. Not that he says, oh, I don't want to have anything to do with you, but he's just like, doesn't affect me, this person has no portion in the world to come. העושה עבירה ביד רמה, כי הוא הקיים, בין שעשה קלות, בין שעשה חמורות, אין לו חלק לעולם הבא. And a person who goes out in public and purposely and flamboyantly and flagrantly does averas, it doesn't matter if they're what's considered kal or hamor, whether they're the light ones or the heavy or the more serious ones. That person loses their share in olam haba. V'zeu hanikra migale panim b'Torah. A person who is brazen in the face of the Torah. Mipnei sheha'ez mitzcho b'gila panav v'lo bosh midivrei Torah. Because this person was like brazenly flaunting their sinning in public and were not ashamed that what they were doing, we're not ashamed before the Torah, if you will, for their actions.
There's a story about such a person relating to what Moshe Feinstein said. It's an amazing story. You may have heard it, maybe not. I don't think it's public. I don't think it was written. I don't know. Anyway, he was a Apostate. Before in America, he was a Apostate in Russia as a young man. And there was one of these other individuals who didn't participate with the community and didn't appear to have a place in Olam Haba, who left a letter to be given to the Rabbi Feinstein on his death, which contained money for the Hebrew Kadisha, maybe more money than that, and instructions that he wanted to be buried face down, which was not only against our tradition, but against the law in Russia.
Interesting.
So they came to Rav Moshe, what do we do? You can't do that. It's the wish of a dying man. Doesn't matter. You can't do that. 3 days later, who came by to dig him up and see how he was buried? The sheriff. He was buried face down, where he stood. They could have gotten in big trouble. Because people do exist. They can make a lot of trouble.
Okay, let's see. We got, I think, Bezat Hashem, I think we can finish this text here. Thank you. It's yes, interesting. Like, I'm going to take you down with me. Right? Halacha Yud Bet. Shnaim hem ha-mosrim. There are two categories of moser. Moser is a person who turns another Jew over, typically to the non-Jewish authorities, right? Ha-moser chavero biyad ovdei kochavim lehorgo or lehakoto. A person who turns another Jew over to non-Jews to be killed or to be physically beaten. And two, ve'hamoser mamon chavero biyad ovdei kochavim or biyad anas shehu ke'oved kochavim. Or a person who turns another Jew's money over to non-Jews as a way of punishment. And both of these people do not have a share in the world to come. Yud Gimel. A person who throws fear into the community, but not for the sake of heaven. You want to say something?
If a Jew engages another Jew in a lawsuit in the courts of the land, and it costs the Jew money, of course, is that an example of that? That he's turning over the money of a Jew to the rest of the community?
No, that's a good question. So strictly speaking, or from the perspective of halacha, Jews who have a dispute are not allowed to go to a civil court. They have to go to Beit Din.
Right.
And even if you have the same outcome, even if you know you're going to get the same outcome, why? Because the Beit Din is l'shem shamayim, and a civil court is l'shem whatever, the Constitution, the law of the land, whatever, and it may be very just, right? We don't need the Torah to do things that are just in the world. We need the Torah to have a connection with God, and so that is not a mosar, but it is a prohibited act, right? If you have a civil dispute with another Jew, you're supposed to go to Beit Din, yeah. But mosar would be like somebody who says, I don't like that you're always playing music at night. Well, I'm playing music in my house and you're sitting in your house. I can close the window, but I like listening to music, right? Well, I'm going to report you to the authorities, and I'm going to make sure that you have to pay a fine, right? And so I call the cops, swear out a complaint, the non-Jewish police come, right? And again, a lot of, this is a much bigger kind of overarching concept that, a lot of the, I don't know the percentage, 98% of the halachas about us dealing with non-Jews arise in us living in Galut. Okay, so when we're living in Galut and we're the minority, we are subject to the will and the might of the majority, where Rambam earlier said, a person who says, forget it, I don't want to identify with the Jew anymore because the Cossacks keep coming beating us up, right? So I'm going to leave town. I'm going to go shave my head and pretend I'm a Cossack, right? And here it's like, well, I don't have any. I can't do anything. I'm angry at this guy. We're here today. I'm angry at this person, at this other Jew, but you know what? Beit Din doesn't do anything anyway. So I'm going to call the non-Jewish authorities, and they'll deal with it, right? Well, there may be some questions about how appropriate that is. Anyway, so a person who throws the fear of not God into the community, זה הרודה ציבור, בחזקותיהם יראים ופחדים ממנו. Person who gets the community all worked up and terrified. בכוונתו לכבוד עצמו. A person does that for their own glory. בכל חפציו שלא לכבוד שמיים. כגון מלכי עובדי כוכבים. So like the non-Jewish kings who serve Avodah Zarah, right? They're going to say, you have to bring me tribute, otherwise I'm going to cut off your head or your hand or whatever it is, And presumably there are Jews who can participate in that, right? Well, I got a nice job, I'm an officer of the king, of the non-Jewish king, and so I'm going to go to my Jewish neighbor and say, you know what, you got to pay tribute. Well, tax collectors, I don't know. י"ד, כל אחד ואחד מ-24 אנשים אלו שמנינו, אף על פי שהם מישראל, אין להם חלק לעולם הבא. יש עבירות קלות מאלו, ואף על פי כן אמרו חכמים שהרגיל בהן אין להם חלק לעולם הבא. So now, all of these 24 people, even though some of them are not what we consider, very terrible sins, Chazal have said that these people do not have a portion in Olam Haba. And thus we need to keep our distance from them and be very careful when we're around people like that. And here they go. You ready? Person who makes up a funny name for another person. For another person.
Oh.
Hmm?
Mocking name?
Well, I would say generally yes, but think about it. I mean, I think that on a deeper level, what Rambam is talking about is respecting the individual. Person, when somebody's got a nickname Curly, what does it usually mean? It means they're bald. When somebody's got a nickname Shorty, what does it usually mean? They're very tall. When a person's got a nickname Slim, what does it usually mean? They're fat, right? So a person who makes up a nickname for another person. Or a person who knows another person's nickname and calls them that. And by the way, if I'm very fat and people call me Slim, if I'm very tall and people call me Shorty, right? I'm also going to be giving up partly my own identity over time, right? So it's not just respecting other people, but it's also reinforcing other people's self-respect and their self-identity. Malbin pene havero barabim, a person who embarrasses another person in public. This is a huge one. Mitkabed bekalon havero, a person who takes honor upon themselves by putting other people down. Mevazeh talmidei chachamim, a person who insults or belittles talmidei chachamim. Mazeh rabotav, and a person who belittles his own teachers. Mevazeh et ha-mo'adot, person who belittles the mo'adot. Really, this is going to be like somebody in Chutz La'aretz who says, second day of Yontif. It's like, we don't need to keep that anymore, right? Mehalel et ha-kodashim, a person who is mechalel different kodesh, who desecrates sacred things. What are we talking about? What does it mean to say that these people don't get a share in the world to come? When they die without having done teshuvah. הרי זה מבני העולם הבא שאין לך דבר שעומד בפני התשובה. But if a person does all these things in their life and then before they die they do teshuvah, they get olam haba. A Jew gets olam haba. Why? Because there's nothing that can resist the power of teshuvah. אפילו כפר בעיקר כל ימיו ובאחרונה שב. Even a person, God forbid, who was a kofar, was rejected all of the truth of Torah their entire life, and at the very end they do teshuvah, יש לו חלק לעולם הבא. They get a portion of the world to come. שנאמר, שלום, שלום לרחוק ולקרוב, אמר אדוני, ורפאתיו. Because God says, shalom, shalom to those who are far away and those who are close. Who are those who are far away? Those who reject the Torah. Who are those who are close? Those who cling to the Torah. כל הרשעים והמומרים וחיות זה באלו שחזרו בתשובה בין בגלוי בין במטמוניות. All of these terrible people, the evil ones and the apostates and everybody who, all of these people, if they do teshuvah, whether they do it in public or even in secret, במטמוניות, מקבלים אותם. They are accepted.
How can you reject them? Saying that.
But he's talking about whether they get a halak or ramabah. So obviously this is now between the individual and God, right? Which is a good thing because I'm not sure that I would be capable of making that kind of a judgment, right? Shene'emar, shuvu banim shuvavim. Return, you wayward ones, right? Af al pi she'adayin shovavhu, even though that person is still a lost, wayward soul, she'are beseter shav v'lo bagolui, because we consider that person a lost, wayward soul because we don't know, because they did their teshuvah in private. And in public, we still look at their behavior. We still associate them with what they were yesterday, right?
Where is that from? Shuvu, Shuvu.
Yirmiyahu, 3rd parak, verse 22. Mechablin oto b'teshuvah, but their teshuvah is accepted. So it's a very, he can't, like Rambam, people that I learn Rambam with people sometimes, they say, well, where did he get that? Or why is he saying that? Or, I can't believe that he really, and the fact is that Rambam he's taking us right back to the core texts. He's taking us right back to Chumash, to Tanakh, to Mishnah, to the Gemara, right? If there are psukim that say this is what you get, he's not going to argue against it. Rather, he's going to say, push all this other stuff aside, right? And Rambam famously says, right, that the reason he wrote the Ad Hazakah, the Mishneh Torah, was because people learned Gemara wrong. People spend all these hours sitting in yeshiva and in kollel arguing. He said the purpose of the machloket in the Gemara is not. People think that the reason to learn Gemara is so that you can have machloket. He says no. The purpose of machloket is for people to learn the will of God, right? That the idea of the Gemara is what's the will of God that emanates from the text of Tanakh. And I think I have a tradition that says this, well, I have a tradition that says that. Well, let's compare them and let's figure out which one actually makes more sense. And instead, people say, you know what, I'm going to argue with you because that's what I learned in the Gemara. The Gemara is full of arguments. The Rambam says, you know what, let's not waste our time with arguments. Let's learn. He says, read my book and you'll know how to be a good Jew. Amen, amen. Thank you very much. Shavua Tov, everybody. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Great being a part of this.